Moshi Moshi.
Hello,
I'm Zeb Ramsbotham,
and I'm Annie Ramsbotham.
and we're the Rambling Ramsbothams.
Our journey might be rambling, but we hope this podcast isn't.
It's a special day.
Yeah, it's a special day, but it's also a holiday. Did you know?
Yeah, it's Mountain Day.
It's Japan's newest national holiday.
It's the best day of the year. I love celebrating mountains.
You don't really celebrate much. I mean, you're celebrating mountains, but I feel like it's one of the days that it's kind of like a useless holiday, just as an excuse so they could add more 3-day weekends. But I was reading it only got added in 2016, so it's like a very recent holiday.
Yeah, they had kind of like a big initiative to add holidays to, I don't know. I feel like it's one of those things like trying to help the economy because people are off work, so they're going to travel and spend money. And also maybe if you give people holidays, they'll feel like having kids or something because it's like, I have more free time. I don't know.
Yeah, so it's a special day. I guess the other reason is because we're recording this ahead of time. Is that why you were going to say?
Yeah, because this year Mountain Day is on a Friday.
Yeah.
So we're sitting in our little podcasting room on a Friday because I didn't have work today. So I've been home all day bothering Annie. And next week we'll actually be on a bike trip.
Yeah.
So if you're listening to this, hopefully we're going to schedule it to be released around the same time that our podcasts are normally released.
Yeah.
We're just recording it early. So if you're listening to this when it's released, we should be getting close
bikes
to Matsumoto.
Yeah, in the middle of Japan.
Yeah, over in Nagano.
Yeah, so this week's episode we're going to talk about planning bike trips, and Zeb has some pro tips because he plans most of our routes and all that stuff. It's kind of it's a hobby. I'm glad it's a hobby of his because I like riding and I like planning, but not to the degree that he likes. But anyway, we'll be talking about how you plan bike rides if you're interested in biking in Japan, and then secondarily I want to talk about Japan's 72 seasons because I didn't know until last week that Japan has 72 different seasons. So yeah,
it's only 4 though.
Zeb doesn't.
Japan has 4 seasons.
Zeb's a skeptic.
I'm a huge skeptic.
So let's start with planning a bike trip.
Yeah, and I don't know. Probably bike trips are the only thing that I plan with much detail.
Yeah, that's actually true. When we go on just general vacations or trips, we like to know where we're sleeping every night, but then I'm the one usually that's like, here's a bunch of activities we should do.
Well, Annie likes activities and I like just a few big things to see.
Yeah.
I don't really need to do much when I go somewhere, but I do like to know. For example, I do like looking at cafes and dinner and stuff like that. And then maybe I'll say over here there's a pretty cool castle or something.
Yeah.
So I don't need a lot of stuff going on.
But for bike trips, you like to plan every detail.
Well, I like to plan a lot of details for bike trips because I just, love riding bikes. It's probably my number one hobby is cycling. And so I just love planning bike rides. And then I think because I like riding bikes so much, I enjoy seeing, that's one thing I care about doing, the best to my ability. Is when I do a bike trip. Making the best of
your time.
Yeah, I want to ride the coolest roads. I want to make sure I see the coolest things along the way.
It's going to be the best bike trip. Okay, so when you're planning a bike trip, I guess the very first thing you want to do is think about the goal of your trip, your fitness level and how much that's going to let you actually ride. Where are you trying to go? How many hours are you trying to ride a day?
Yeah. So I guess as an example, there are a lot of companies in Japan that do cycling tours. And we actually had a meeting with one guy who came through Ishikawa because he was, I guess, looking for some tips or something. So we actually met with him and talked to him about his thing. But for example, I think they were only doing 60 kilometers a day or something. I think they rode a total of 500 kilometers, but they did it over 10 days or something like that.
And in miles, that's 40 miles.
35
something miles.
Maybe, something like that.
Yeah, which is fine because the people that sign up for the trip, their step one of their bike tour goal was just get out there, just see something nice, have a relaxed trip, versus maybe Zeb's goals are let's see how far I can go and how fast. And then when we do rides together, we kind of temper that, because I like to see new things, and that usually means that we need to go somewhere kind of far, but I also like to stop a lot. So my goals are less about how fast can we get there and more about how far can I go to see something new and cool.
I guess so, yeah. And I guess I was just like saying that it's just like a reference to, it's just like all in relationship to like your personal fitness and your personal goals, which should be pretty obvious. But I think there are some bike tours you can do that you don't have to be a cyclist at all. Like you can really not really be a cyclist or never have really done much time on a bike, and you can sign up and do the tours and you'll probably be pretty comfortable. And then there are some tours like for people who have been, riding for a little bit longer or they've like put more time into the sport. And so that's probably like where Annie and I are at. So for example, when I was planning this tour or this like ride, I knew that we could probably do, we can do multiple days in the range of like 100 kilometers, which is like 62, 63 miles. And we can do like day after day of doing that. And I mean, of course, there's like other things like depending on your elevation and stuff like that.
Yeah, like so when we were in Nagano, that ride was only like 70 miles. Not only that was a big day of riding, but it felt massive because of the elevation. So I couldn't do back-to-back 60-mile days if they were like 8,000 vertical feet every day. Zeb gave me some eyebrows.
So yeah, that's like a big like thing to keep in mind. It's just your own fitness. And then of course like there's also the goal of the trip. So I usually like both of us, we like to go see new stuff, and just traveling by bike is really unique and fun.
And it's easy to pick a destination as your goal on a bike trip.
Yeah, so I'll usually just like look around a map and pick a destination. But then of course, like a secondary goal is always like improving fitness, I think, like while you're on a trip. So that's also why it's fun to do something like a little ambitious, where maybe the distance is a little bit longer. So those are kind of like my two goals, I guess, is like see something new, but then also get in a bunch of good riding that'll help improve your fitness.
Yeah. So let's say you have your like fitness goal, like how much you want to ride a day, and you have your start and your end. How do you actually plan the routes, like getting from A to B?
So I wouldn't call it like cheating. Like I do think about how, so in like 2000, probably like 12 or 2000, I think 2012, I actually did a ride across North Carolina with a bunch of my friends from college. When I was in undergrad, we wanted, for spring break, we were like, oh, let's ride to Wilmington. And so we were riding from Boone, which is in the mountains of North Carolina, to Wilmington, which is on the coast of North Carolina. And I can remember doing that one. Like, I'm honestly really impressed that it was as easy as it was.
Did it.
Yeah, because we were writing down directions and then like taping them to our top tube, or we would each take turns memorizing turns.
Wow.
Like we would know like, okay, like, all right, Miles, you're gonna have the first like 6 turns, and then like Craig, you'll have like turn like 7 through 12. And so we were kind of like memorized.
If I was like the last person on that list, I would totally forget all my turns by the time we like got to them.
Yeah, it was impressive that we made it, because we also I don't know if any of us really had like
bike bags.
We didn't have bike bags, but I was even thinking like iPhones were really new still. Yeah. And so none of us really had a phone that was really like capable of internet connectivity.
I mean, it's like doing road trips when you didn't have GPS in your car.
Yeah. So yeah, I was just impressed that we made it, because now it's like, it's so easy.
Yeah, I don't think that's cheating. I mean, that would be like me saying, well, I'm not going to do a road trip with Google Maps, because that's cheating.
I mean, I think that there are some people like that like to plan everything by map.
Yeah,
like they like to bust out the maps.
If you're like the kind of backpacker or hiker that likes to use the compass and stuff, like as part of your goal.
Well, I mean, I guess it's even now, like if you think about people that go on hikes in Pisgah, they probably use Pisgah maps.
Yeah.
Where you could just hop on Trail Forks and you could like plan your whole like route out, and then have like a little GPS computer. So that's basically what I do. Is I use a website called Strava, and it's a paid feature to create a route, but I'm a member. And if you don't know what Strava is, it's basically social media, but for endurance athletes, where you can upload a GPS file, and then like all of your friends can see like a little map of like what you did, and you can thumbs up each other's like rides and comment
I guess
on
the
them.
coolest part about Strava, besides the route building feature, is that people make segments, and so when you do a route and you ride the same section of road or trail that somebody else has ridden, your time gets automatically added to like an all-time all-rider leaderboard. And so you can make that kind of gamified, where you can specifically try to be the fastest on that segment, and you can make it's like racing people outside of real time. Like you can take people's fastest times.
Yeah, it's basically like doing a time
advance.
trial, but you can do it whenever you want, any day of the year, and then you upload it. That was kind of like the initial pull of Strava. That was like the first reason that people were like, "Oh, have you ever heard of Strava?"
I think that Map My Ride, isn't that a free, like?
They also have a paid thing.
Oh, okay.
But I think some of the features are free, some of them are paid, and then there's also like Ride with GPS, which that was like one of the first ones was Ride with GPS. But
yeah,
so
it's just Strava.
Yeah, it's just like an online feature where you can use a map and you can create a route, and then you can download the route to a little cycling computer, and the cycling computer basically will have the route on it, and then you just follow.
I guess you could also follow it, like you could put your iPhone or your phone on your, like have that in front of you and follow that. You could,
but I'm sorry, it looks so dumb.
Yeah, but
like when I see people riding and they have like a phone strapped to their computer, I'm like, what are you doing?
Yeah, but
like,
you don't need to be elitist if like somebody's just trying to get into bike touring. Maybe they don't want to pay for a Garmin yet or a Wahoo.
So I would agree that that's true, but another huge benefit is my cycling computer. The battery can last, it's like 15 hours.
Last way
where
longer.
If you had a phone and the screen, like we did it with a motorcycle, we would use my phone. The screen, of course, with the brightness, especially if you're riding in the sun, drains it so fast. So it's a huge benefit. But basically, I do all my route planning on this website called Strava, and there are a couple key benefits to it. One is actually I do use the segments, because you can organize the segments by dates ridden. So if you're confused if a road is going to be closed, or you don't know how well like it's used, you can actually look at segments on the road and you can see when it was last ridden, so you can tell like, okay, like as of yesterday people were riding it,
which is really helpful in Japan, because there seem to be a lot of road closures with natural disasters and stuff.
And then Strava also has a heat map feature where globally, if your rides are set to be like publicly accessible, Strava is collecting all that data and then they put it on a map. And so when you're planning a route, you can actually see the roads that are ridden the most. So that
like
can
the color
be really
of
helpful.
The road is darker if more people ride it. So it's like a ombre map version where the darker areas are more high traffic. Yeah,
so for example, like an expressway here in Japan would be white, because you're not allowed to ride bikes on expressways, so no one rides on it. But then a really popular road, depending on the color you have your heat map set to, mine's set to blue, so it's like a cold heat map, will be like bright blue, because tons of people ride on it. Which there are some like pitfalls and caveats to that, because for example, there's a group ride that happens near us and it starts at 5:30 in the morning. So at 5:30 in the morning, the road that they use is really nice to ride on. But at about like 5 p.m., really not. It's like a really busy road. So there can be like some things that like affect that and change that. But basically what I like to do is I'll kind of look around on Google Maps to find like a cool city or somewhere that I think is reasonably far away, but it looks like it has some cool attractions. So for example, we're going to go to Matsumoto. And it has like a castle, one of the original castles.
Not just any castle. It has one of the 12 remaining castles with an original keep.
So we're going to go see Matsumoto. There are like cool restaurants there. They have a little historic district. It kind of sounds like a little Kanazawa up in the mountains. So it sounds really fascinating, and I'd love to go see it. So I kind of picked Matsumoto because of that. And then, so basically I clicked where we live to start the ride, and then I clicked Matsumoto. And Strava will auto route on the most popular roads all the way to where you click, if it can. Sometimes it'll be like, can you please like pick somewhere closer, because we can't do that. And then I kind of work on it from there. So I'll see what the most popular route is, but then I also like to look along the route.
Like sightseeing stuff?
Yeah, sightseeing, like different cool cities. And then also, of course, keeping in mind like how many days you have available and how many days or how much you can ride per day.
Yeah.
So originally I'd actually planned like a really long route because I thought maybe I could take extra vacation days and we could ride like all the way south, kind of like near Himeji and Kyoto and all that stuff down there. And I was like, maybe, you know, we could take like...
see 2 original castles.
Well, I was like, I'm going to have like 12 days off.
Yeah.
And I was like, we could just do like a really big ride. But then talking to you, your work schedule, it was better only to have like 7 days off. So we could delay it a little.
Our biggest trip. Like before this, our longest trip was the Noto Peninsula, and that was only 3 days. So yeah, I'm kind of glad we're doing a week before we move to like nearly 2 weeks.
Well, it's our biggest trip together.
Yeah, it's my biggest trip.
Yeah. I did my ride across. I've done across North Carolina twice.
Yeah, but
so
that was only 5 days. Not only 5 days, but that was 5 days. And
yeah,
then
but
you wanted
similar in distance. Because the first time I did it, 2 of the day, or the second time I did it, 2 of the days were like 140-mile days.
Yeah.
So in like 2 days, I did like almost 300 miles.
Well, I'm just glad that we're doing a week just to see like how it goes before we do like a 12-day or 2-week trip.
Yeah, and I really do want to see Matsumoto. So that's kind of like a thing to take into account is like, okay, how many days do we have? And then I can kind of like lengthen or shorten the route depending on how many days we have and what we actually want to see along the way.
So when you're looking for like sightseeing spectacles, do you use Google Maps for that part?
Yeah, I'll scroll around on Google Maps and kind of look for stuff that looks cool. And I love finding like smaller, kind of out of the way, like towns or villages, and then kind of zooming in on those and seeing if they have like
because sometimes we'll find some funny things. Like, I'm kind of bummed that we're not going to be able to see this on this plan, but like Zeb found the longest ice cream in Japan. I don't know if it's really the longest ice cream.
Well, I actually saw that one reading an article on the Asahi.
Oh.
So the Asahi newspaper had an article about the longest ice cream in Japan.
So it's basically a samurai sword of ice cream, is that right?
It's a ninja sword.
A ninja sword.
Yeah, because it's at the Ninja Cafe in Takayama.
Oh, okay.
Which we're riding through.
Yeah, and so we could get the longest ice cream. One, it probably wouldn't be very wise because it's like an hour or two into a ride. So we'd eat this like massive ice cream and then get back on our bikes, which I'm not that worried about. I love ice cream.
Be fine.
The biggest reason why we're not doing it is because the cafe doesn't open until like 10, right? And
yeah, it didn't open until 10, and we're planning on starting our days super early
5.
to beat the heat.
Yeah.
And so if we waited, if we waited to get there at 10, then we'd have to, do like 3 or 4 additional hours kind of in the peak heat of the day.
Yeah.
So probably not worth it.
We'll go back, but we might find other like funny random things like that.
Yeah, there's stuff like that, and then conveniently, because we live in Japan and we get to interact with Japanese people, this one guy we met told us about this city called Gujo, which is in Gifu, and it's south of Takayama. And so I just saw on the map, I was like, oh, well, if we go a certain way, we can ride through Takayama, ride down through Gujo, and then Gujo has a really old castle too, so we can see that. Maybe we'll stop at a cafe in Gujo, and then we won't be far from where we're sleeping that night. So also kind of like talking to people and getting some like insider tips. He also recommended like a couple roads that he rides on his he uses his motorcycle on those roads, and he was like, oh, like on a bike it'd be really cool, like you guys should ride these roads. So it's kind of like a combination of things, is using Strava to make sure the heat map works, and then also in conjunction with Google Maps to see like, okay, is there anything actually like cool there? And then there's the tricky part about like where you're going to sleep. Yeah,
that's like the last stage, because sometimes we have had to reroute because there isn't anywhere to stay.
Yeah, so sometimes, for example, I really wanted to stay in Gujo. I was like, oh, it'd be cool if we could like stay in Gujo because we'll get there, pretty early on Saturday, and so we can hang out and like see, because it's supposed to be a really cool old town. but they have like a month-long festival in August, and so it seems like it's just
that
constantly
in itself
booked.
Is wild.
Yeah, so like nothing was available in Guizhou that was like at all even close to reasonable in terms of price.
Sounds fun.
Yeah, so it's neat, but unfortunately we couldn't
Yeah.
afford to stay in Guizhou.
So we're staying a little outside.
Yeah, so we're riding like a little bit past Guizhou to get to another really cool, like, and this is where sometimes it is really fun because it's a pretty random town. Like, I don't think there's really much of a reason to visit it.
Yeah.
Especially not to like sleep there.
I mean, that's kind of the best part about bike touring. Like, you go places that you wouldn't drive a car to as the final destination just because it's like, oh, well, we're passing through.
Yeah, and it is kind of like, so we probably wouldn't have stayed there if this was like a car trip. Because obviously in a car, we're covering so much more distance. And we'd be in the AC, so we could just drive all day. So we probably wouldn't stay in this random little town. It's called Kaneyama. We probably wouldn't stay there otherwise because for the bike trip, it's a super convenient kind of like midway point where like, okay, it's a little outside of Guizhou, but it's not quite as far as the next town. So let's stay there. But it's a place I'm really excited about. One, we found this like really cool, like old, like Showa era house that you can stay in. And then also on Google Maps, there's this random like labyrinth of like little alleyways that are like all kinds of different levels. It's like 3 levels of like alleyways, and there's like a river. And it's on Google Maps as like a site, but it only has like 6 reviews. But people are like, this is so cool. Like, I love
Hopefully
visiting
it is
here.
cool. Yeah, I'm excited.
So it's probably the kind of thing that I don't think we would necessarily go out of our way to see that.
And I guess when the bike trip, it's like low risk. Like, you know, sometimes when you're on a car trip, you're trying to get from one place to the next very quickly. So there's not, like, to get off the highway and go see something is kind of a big time investment. Like, it better be
it's a bit of
good.
a commitment.
Yeah, and on a bike, you're just going so slow and through so many random places that it's not a big deal if you get somewhere and you're like, oh, well, that wasn't that cool. But it makes it so much better when you see places that are like, wow, I never would have expected this.
Yeah, or do you remember the tree we saw on our way to Fukui?
That one tree, but yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, we just saw this like
Massive tree
in a shrine, and we stopped. And randomly
later...
I think
you talked about this on a different episode.
Yeah, randomly later I found out it's like one of the oldest trees in the world.
Yeah.
And it's been visited by an emperor and all this stuff.
It was a very good tree.
Yeah.
And we wouldn't have known or stopped if we hadn't been on a bike.
Yeah, we would have just blown right by that thing.
Do you have any other tips about... Actually, while we're on the lodging thing, we both are credit card campers so far. We'd like to bring our tent and actually go bike packing in like what some purists, I guess, would call the true bike packing. But for now, we've only been doing like...
Yeah, I think people would call what we do bike touring.
Yeah. We've only been doing pre-booking the lodging.
Yeah. We're not sleeping outside.
Yeah, and we're not just showing up somewhere and seeing if the hotel is available, which is also fine, but that's too much risk for me. Maybe Zeb is more comfortable with that, but...
I think it's too much risk on a bicycle.
Yeah.
Like, if we had a tent and our sleeping bag with us, and we could just, like, kind of, wild camp in a park, I would be okay with trying that.
But yeah, what if we just got to... I'm blanking on the name, but the town in Gifu, and where it's just booked for a month. Like, that would be such a bummer to just show up.
Sleeping in a bush, I guess.
Yeah, I guess. But, like, our friend Kyle that visited, he did go bike packing and brought a tent. And so, then you don't have to worry about...
Technically, they would say it's not bike packing because he was on paved roads.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That pure?
So even though he was sleeping in a tent, he was riding on pavement.
I don't know anyone that is that, like, set on the bike packing definition to be, like...
That website... Bikepacking.com, they are.
Oh.
They say it has to be like 70% off-road or something.
Interesting.
Yeah, otherwise it's bike touring.
Okay. Well, either way, yeah, we'd like to camp, like go camping while biking sometime.
Yeah.
And if you do that and that's your preferred, like one of your goals of the trip, like we mentioned before, then yeah, the hotels aren't even an issue you have to worry about.
Yeah, I would actually say like if you're into... And this is actually what Kyle did, is he bought a tent while he was here. But if you're into camping and you're planning on doing like a car trip or something around Japan, show up and buy like a tent here at a secondhand store.
At 2nd Street, which is like kind of like Goodwill in America. It's just like a secondhand shop.
It's a secondhand shop, but it's kind of like
It's
nice.
maybe
It's
nicer
very
than
nice
Goodwill.
stuff, yeah. Yeah, he bought a tent, and the camping sites here are either free or incredibly cheap. So if you did a car trip around Japan and you were okay with camping, you could have some like really cool accommodations for super affordable.
As far as Ishikawa, we don't know anything about outside this prefecture, but yeah, around here they're pretty cheap.
Well, everywhere I've looked at like
okay.
camp. I've saved some that
Oh,
I want to
really?
go to in the future. Yeah.
Can't wait.
And people in the reviews will be like, yeah, it was like $6 or it's like free.
Wow.
And it's very impressive. So yeah, I would say camping. Maybe another tip in conjunction with lodging is there's a lot on like booking.com, which is a very popular like English website. But Japan also has, because they have such a big domestic tourism market, they have tons of their own travel websites.
Like Rakuten is...
Rakuten, there's like Jaran, there's another one. There are like a bunch of them.
But yeah, sometimes we'll look at a town and it looks like nothing's booked on like Google and Booking, and then if you look on Rakuten, I'm probably not saying that right. Or
There's also Yahoo. I think they have their own.
But yeah, sometimes places are not, there's no online booking. You have to like call or email or use their website form. But
Yeah, so we're staying in this like really cool place I'm excited about. That's an old like house.
like a ryokan or...
No, it's in a postal town along the Nakasendo. And we're staying in this like old house, and it's basically just like a guest house. Like I think it's a dude's mom owns it, and then he kind of manages letting a few people stay there.
Yeah, and it didn't look like there was any space in the town left, right?
Well, because when you clicked on the specifically this place, one, it didn't even pop up when you search for hotels in the area. I was like super zoomed in on Google Maps and just looking around, and I happened to click on it, and there were like 6 reviews, and all the reviews were talking about how like incredible it was to stay there and how they thought it was like the best place ever. But then there's no booking information. There was no phone number listed. I happened to like copy and paste the name, and I Googled that, and I found a website that was made in like the 90s. And that website happened to have this email address. And I thought the email address was like, certainly no one uses it. But on a whim, I emailed it, and then the guy emailed me back from like a totally different email address. And he was like, thanks for getting in touch.
Stuff
He's
like that
yeah,
is
you can
so,
stay
like,
here.
It
And I was
just
like,
feels so
okay.
fantastical, like there's some mythical world, you know, where
Yeah.
there's... We're just going to be biking to this mountain town and staying in this, like, mythical house that exists off the internet.
Yeah, and I should reply to it. There was actually someone that asked a question on Google Maps, because you can do that.
Oh, yeah.
And someone asked a question like a month
How do I
ago.
book
Yeah, they were like,
this?
how do you book this?
Yeah, you should
Like,
reply.
Yeah,
But
I'm like,
it-
well, you have to email this like weird email address, and then you
Yeah.
can talk to the guy.
I guess either that's not his main job, or they just stay afloat from, like, repeat customers, or the type of people that just pass through and kind of
Yeah.
knock on the door type
'Cause
reservations.
I don't know how popular it is anymore, but I know historically it was like a really big deal that you could just show up in a town and you would stop by like the tourist information center, and the tourist information center people would just like call
Oh, yeah, they
some
would
like
book it
local
for you.
ryokans, and then they would find somewhere, and they'd be like, yeah, great, like give you an address, and then you could go there,
That's pretty cool.
and then you would go check in.
I bet that, I mean, there's a tourist center in Kanazawa. I wonder if they would still do that. Like, you could just drop by.
Maybe.
But
But yeah, so sometimes if you're like patient or you plan enough ahead, you can find some like really cool stuff in Japan that like to use the term like off the beaten path or whatever. It kind of is like it's a little more harder to get to or a little more inaccessible, but it is out there. So that's like a tip maybe, is to spend half your day looking at Google Maps, zoomed super in, and
yeah,
clicking
When
on things
when
frantically.
People are like, "Oh, what are your hobbies?" You can be like zooming in on Google Maps.
It kind of is.
Yeah.
Like if you look
It
at
is
my...
addictive. I get really sucked into like random places. Like, oh, I've never like explored this part of the world, and then like 3 hours later, you're like, did you know this lake is like connected to this? Blah blah blah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's fun. So, like, if you open my phone and go to my Google app and like look at it, Japan is just like covered in like little organized pins of like, here's a restaurant I want to go to. Like, here's
Yeah.
a place I want to stay.
I have that, but just ice cream.
I'm not surprised.
Well, so for this trip, what are your feelings about our departure?
Yeah, we're going to start
everything?
super early tomorrow morning. I think I'm good.
You seem pretty nonchalant in general, but...
Yeah, because I'm not really, like, worried about anything because, I mean, I know it's something we're capable of, and, like, I know that it shouldn't be anything, like...
I like going on bike trips with you because you're not bothered or worried about anything. I'm not I tell Zeb that I operate at, like, a just general level of concern, which is, like, healthy to a certain degree. You know, you need a little positive stress to motivate yourself, but, yeah, I tend to think about... I don't think I'm a negative person, but I like to think about what could go wrong.
Yeah, I think that, like, for me, it's like once I have a plan and I have everything, like, organized, I know all I have to do is, like, execute
just
the plan.
Bike.
Yeah, like, all I have to do is ride my bike from A to B, and then from B to C, and then C to D. Like, I do look ahead, and, you know, I've seen, like, and I told you we need to look at the maps together. But, like, I know where, like, convenience stores are and stuff like that, so...
Yeah, I know nothing will go wrong, really, but there's always what if. No, I guess
Yeah, but I think that's why I don't have the what ifs, because, like, we have the plan.
Yeah.
So, like, a what if would be like, well, what if we get a flat tire? And it's like, well, we have stuff to fix it. And then it is, like, always, like, worst case scenario, like... And I think another reason maybe I'm not stressed is because... we do have a bit of, like, a safety fund in savings or whatever. So, like, the true worst case scenario is, like, something on the bike breaks or, like, one of us gets hurt. But, yeah, like, in that case, you just call an ambulance.
Yeah.
And so, like, maybe, like, worst case scenario is, yeah, like, something on the bike breaks.
There's no
cell signal. And then we just have to, like, call someone or hitchhike and get the bike fixed. And it's going to cost a bunch of money. And it's going to be a pain.
Yeah, I mean, that's not a very bad worst case scenario, so when you think about it like that, it's not bad. But yeah, I guess I think about the things that are not really emergencies, like, oh, we better get up really early because it's going to be super hot, and, like, am I going to be able to make it or be comfortable, you know? I'm not worried about
I think it's going to be fine. I think
but...
day 3 might be difficult just because it's the third day in a row, but then if you think about, like,
and that's our biggest day of riding. No, never mind. So day 3 and then there's a rest day and then it's our biggest day of riding.
Yeah, so day 4 of riding, which is technically day 5 after a rest day in Matsumoto to see the city, that's the biggest day of riding,
which will be one of my biggest days of riding in general, so that'll be interesting.
Buckle up. Yeah, stuff like that, like, on a typical weekend of riding, we'll do 2 big days. So day 1, tomorrow, I'm not assuming it to be too difficult because, like, a normal Saturday. And then day 2, Sunday, kind of another normal day of riding on the 2nd.
So
maybe day 3 will be, like, slightly difficult because it's the 3rd day of riding. But I don't think it'll be too bad. It's relatively short.
Yeah. I do like doing things that scare me a little bit. Like, I try to do something scary every year, something, like, big that's scary every year, just so that I can, like...
Not a lot of scary things this year.
We really have. I've been really brave.
Well.
No, they're generally not, like, truly scary, but just things that are, like, uncomfortable. Because then, I don't know, you feel, like, good about yourself after, and then the next thing that's scary is bigger. So.
Yeah. And I'm not even worried. Like, I think the heat is uncomfortable, but I'm not worried about it.
There's a whole lot of stuff about heat exhaustion and heat stroke here in Japan.
Yeah, people are like...
Well, I mean, you roll your eyes,
they give warnings about everything.
They do give warnings about everything.
I'll look at the weather one day, and they're like, watch out, like, it's going to rain. And then the very next day, they're like, dear God, the air is so dry. They're like, watch out for the dry air. And it's like, come on. It
is a bit exhausting, like, how extreme everything is made to be. But
it is funny.
I think if we're careful, it should be not a problem.
Yeah. And I'm excited to wake up, like, early anyway, because when you wake up early in the morning, it's, like, super beautiful. There aren't a lot of people out.
Cool. Like,
when you ride through places, it's, like, really quiet. It feels magical. Birds. But I've actually thought about this, this is, like, a slight aside. But I think coming from America where, like, I guess I feel like in America it's kind of like you look out for yourself. It's a little bit...
It's a much more individualistic society.
Yeah, it's more individualistic, and you kind of have to, like, watch out for yourself. And no one warns you on a like hot day.
Yeah.
Like, hey, it's hot.
Yeah,
Like,
not
you
at least
should-
not the same way. Like here we
Like,
have,
you should make sure to drink some water. And
we
here,
literally have the speakers in the neighborhood will
Yeah.
announce just to the whole neighborhood.
it's like the world stops and they tell you, even like when a strong thunderstorm's coming, they'll make an announcement and they'll be like, my God, like, it's going to be some lightning.
Like sometimes it's cozy because I'll be sitting in our living room and then the speakers will come on and I'm like, oh, someone's looking out for me, you know? Like just the general other is looking out for me.
Yeah, the
But
person
then-
in town hall, like, Tadaima, like,
and I know that like they don't really care about me, but yeah, sometimes like it's nice, but yeah, it's not
so
necessary.
they don't care about us because they only make the announcement in Japanese.
Wow.
So we don't know what's going on.
No,
But it is interesting how in Japan, in the society, there's so many warnings. And I guess, like, I feel bad, but sometimes I feel like it's almost too much. It's like you just need to let people figure it out
Like
a little
humans
bit
are
on their
capable
own.
of
Yeah, like,
more.
we're capable. Because now I feel like I know people that truly are, like, a little scared sometimes to go outside.
well, it is
because
scary
it's
the way
hot.
they talk about it.
Yeah, I mean, but I guess that's my point is, like, come on, like,
Yeah.
let people figure it out a little
Prepare
bit
yourself
on their
and
own.
then-
And then,
Yeah.
or even like just generic outdoorsy stuff. Like if you're going for
This
a
weekend
hike.
you're gonna like get heat stroke and take all that back.
I thought about that. Yeah, like what if I just like just
You
pass
better
out?
not. My gosh.
I'm not gonna get heat stroke.
Seb's like, this body's perfect.
I mean, yeah, I'm not. I cut my hair. I'm not worried.
Yeah, I cut your hair. I've
Yeah.
been cutting Zeb's hair recently because, I don't know, first it started as, like, we were too intimidated to go to a hair salon and talk to somebody in person, but I feel like, well, I've been to a hair salon and, you know, you don't need...
Yeah, I don't cut your hair.
You don't need very high conversational skills to have your hair cut, but now we just keep doing it because we're cheap, I guess.
Yeah, it's free.
Yeah, just costs my time.
Yeah, worth nothing.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Wow.
but that's kind of a generic overview of like planning a bike trip and kind of like what I think about when I'm looking into a bike trip. And honestly, planning a bike trip in Japan is a lot of fun because there are so many small towns and villages.
Mm-hmm.
And there's just so much to see.
So on my YouTube channel, which I just posted another video if you want to watch it, it's Anywhere and Everywhere. But I got a really cool comment from a guy who actually did the whole length of Japan. He started in Soya and went to Sato. Sata. And so he went from like the very southernmost part all the way up to the tip of Hokkaido.
Mhm.
And he did it in 19 days, which I think is pretty fast. And he did it in the summer, which is really impressive.
He
Because
didn't get heat stroke.
Yeah,
I looked at his posts and he said that
That's
one day
true.
the high was like 40.
it's very
And he said
reassuring.
the average temperature was like 38.
And do you know where his highest temperature was? It was in Ishikawa.
Oh, really?
At least from what I could see. So he posted everything on the GCN app, which I also didn't know GCN like had an app social feature. But yeah, it was very cool. So if you do bike touring and you're listening to this, email us because I want to hear like where you've been, where you're planning to go, if you have tips about your route planning or your ride stuff that we didn't talk about. Yeah, tell us. ramblingramsbothams@gmail.com.
Wow. Yep.
So, speaking of the heat, though, I got into a rabbit hole the other day about... I forget how this happened. Oh, I was studying kanji on Wanikani, and they have little, like, notes to help you remember the kanji, and one of mine was season, and in the notes it was like, because as you know, Japan has 72 seasons, haha, and I was like, what? And so I Googled that. The first thing that came up, actually, it's the new album by Metallica. I had to Google it to make sure it was actually Metallica and I didn't say something dumb. But yeah, so Metallica just came out with an album called 72 Seasons, and they're referencing like 18 times 4 is 72, so like the first 18 years of your life. But in Japan, 72 Seasons, completely unrelated from Metallica, is Nanaju ni Kyo, and it starts with taking the 4 seasons of like spring, summer, fall, winter, and then you divide them into 24 seasons. I don't know why. It came from the Chinese lunar calendar, it says, and then it made its way to Japan. And then those are further subdivided so that you have 72. And each micro season is about 5 days, which seems really excessive. And I understand why Zeb is like a hater. But also...
Well, I just think it's so funny because it compounds this idea of like Japanese exceptionalism, where they're like so proud about like the most minute detail, and that they're like always
yeah,
we have 4 seasons.
They're very
and it's
into
like,
seasons here.
Yeah, where we're from, we had 4 seasons too, and they're like, no, you don't understand.
I will say the seasons here are like much more intense. Like winter is way snowier, summer is way hotter, but
that's
yeah,
true. They're like, they tend to be more
extreme,
divided. But then yeah, when people are amazed that you're not super blown away by the fall colors here, because you're like, well, yeah, where I came from, we also had fall colors, and they're like, oh,
other people have
you
foliage.
had the seasons. Like, yes.
Well,
and they're like, did it snow where you came from? I was like, yes.
Well,
So when Annie was like, did you know there's 72 seasons? I wasn't having it.
So the 72 season idea, from what I can read about it and understand, I think it's more of like a practice of just being aware of shifting things, like gradual transitions in nature, and kind of like ecological practices that happen, like that develop around the culture of each season, especially in a agricultural society. Not so much now, but I think now, being like out of touch with agriculture, like it is nice to kind of think about, because the seasons are so divided by like the animals that come out during that time or the plants that are blooming during that time. So, for example, because you might be thinking, what can you even divide 72 times? But we're currently, as I'm recording this on Friday, August 11th, we're in the beginning of autumn, which is hard to believe. But this is at the end of the 5-day period of Cool Winds Blow is the name of this season. Suzukazi Itaru. And we're going to be going into the season called Evening Cicadas Sing. Higurashi Naku. And then after that will be Thick Fog Descends. So yeah, it is a bit extreme. Like, it's not like the evening cicadas haven't been singing, or maybe thick fog won't be descending.
It's also funny because, not to be a further hater, but I'm sure that this is very like Kyoto or Tokyo centric.
I was going to say that also.
Like,
it's
I'm
very
sure
central
if you're
Japan.
in like Kagoshima, or you're up in Hokkaido, you're like, what?
Like they have like final frost is like in April or something, and like I'm sure that it's still cold.
Yeah, people up in Hokkaido are like, it's still snowing.
Yeah.
What are you talking about?
But I think it's still just generally a nice idea to recognize and to have gratitude for like the transience of things, and it is nice. There's a little app that I downloaded that you can. The only thing the app does is when you open it, it tells you like what season you're in,
where you're at today,
and it refreshes every 5 days.
This reminded me a lot, and I told you this, of the Sand County Almanac, which is by Otto Leopold, and it's basically a very similar idea. Like he would just write down like the first day that he saw, like geese flying north or geese flying south. He would write it down, and
What state was he in? I don't know.
Like Illinois or something.
I don't know.
I don't know what state he was in.
The pressure of the man with the master's degree in Appalachian Studies.
Well, he wasn't from Appalachia.
Oh, okay.
I learned about him when I was studying sustainable development in undergrad.
Oh, I see.
But that was 10 years ago now.
No, I'm just
Can't
giving
be
you a hard
expected
time.
to remember. But he did something very similar, where he didn't call it a season, but he would observe nature, and then he created like a diary that he could look through every year and kind of be like, well, last year, on September 1st, this was the first time I saw this happen. Yeah. And then maybe, the next year was like September 5th, and then one year. So he kind of created like a range of like expectations for changes throughout the year.
It is nice.
So it's kind of like
I don't think anyone is using that as a calendar. Like, I don't think it was ever made as okay, well, now that it's the 8th, we're going to be expecting those cicadas.
Yeah, but I guess it just does make me think about, when was this created? So which area? And is it just like Kansai?
Well, because it came from China, that's another reason
why.
Well,
I'm also just curious about like when it was created, because I wonder if you compared it to dates with, like climate change.
Global warming, yeah.
Yeah, I think the dates would be shifted or changed, so it'd be interesting to see,
I want to say
is this still accurate? Or
1700s was when like this was created. Like, it was earlier in China and then it was adopted here. But
So I wonder if they've ever changed have they updated it for
yeah,
the
the
warming
modern
climate?
world.
Yeah.
Well, so the other reason I like it is because there are seasons out of like the 4 seasons that I like more than others, and then there are times during the seasons that I like or dislike. So like right now, I'm not a big fan of August. I just don't really like being hot. And so it's nice to see something where it's like, for these 5 days, like out of the whole year, like isn't it great that you get, this isn't a good example because cool winds are not blowing, but
But
like
that
it's
does make me
nice
think.
just to think about for these 5 days, like let's
Yeah.
appreciate this until next year.
Yeah. I'm just envious of all our friends back home that are riding in Western North Carolina right now. And on Strava, they're all talking about how it's like cold.
Yeah,
They're
well,
like, wow, it finally feels like fall's really coming. And they're like, I wore my long sleeve jersey today. And I'm like,
Well,
oh. Like,
our winter didn't last as long as theirs though. It was more intense, but then it was over faster.
yeah, but they get, like a 60-degree day in the middle of winter. And it's nice. But,
So if you're curious, my birthday is in the beginning of summer season. So May 15th through the 20th is the bamboo shoots sprout season. That's fun.
That's
And
fun.
yours is yours is the very first day of the greater snow season. So December 17th to 21st, the salmon are gathering and swimming upstream. So that's cool.
Yep.
If you are not a hater like Zeb is, I'm gonna link this website in the
Sorry.
notes if you want to like read through and see like when your birthday is, or just I don't know, read through all the different micro seasons.
Yeah,
Well, do you have a word for the week?
I do.
Wrap us up.
Yeah. Do you want me to go first?
Mm-hmm.
So my word is casa.
Like umbrella?
No, related. So is an umbrella kesa?
No. Wait. No, I'm confused. You keep talking. I'm gonna Google it.
Okay, so casa, I saw that that the word umbrella comes from casa. So
It is casa.
Are they
but
both? Okay.
there is a kanji for umbrella.
yeah, it's going to be a different kanji because casa is the word for hat, but it's specifically the like conical hat
Oh.
that you see like old people wear, but
that
they
makes
still wear
sense
it
why
today.
it's related.
Yeah, so I think they took the word for umbrella from the hat. But I saw that it also, you can use the word casa in some situations to also mean shade.
Oh.
But yeah, I was just thinking about that because shade, I guess, is nice this time of the year.
Yeah.
And hopefully we'll have
We're
some
gonna need
shade. So yeah, it just made me think about that. So casa. And also I saw that a coworker at school has casa in his name, and it's the same kanji for hat.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. I don't know what the second kanji in his name is, so I should look at it. But
Yeah. You could ask him.
maybe he's hat something.
Shady hat.
Yeah. Hat man.
Well, mine is like a kind of a phrase word, but it's mono no aware, and it generally translates to the sensitivity of things. And so I was thinking about it when I was talking about those 72 seasons. And so there's 4 kanji in this. The first kanji, mono, means thing. And then the second kanji, no, is like the possessive particle, kind of like the word of. And then are is the 2 kanji together are a word that kind of, when I looked it up, they were like, it translates to pathos. And I was like, okay, but what does pathos mean? So kind of like sensitivity or deep feelings or empathy, kind of. And so we don't have the same word in English, but it's generally about beauty and the brevity of things, or kind of like the impermanence of things, like seasons, or just like anything
Like
that
the
happens
72
in
seasons.
life.
Oh,
Yeah, it's like
How
tender,
magical.
a little wistful. Yeah, just gratitude for passing things. And
That's
with
very
that,
nice.
we've come to the end of our another end of our podcast.
yeah, this was the 72nd season of the rambling. Actually, I guess this would be the
No.
first season because we're over a year now. So we've reset.
Yeah, maybe we're in the second season.
We're in the second season now. Oh.
Well,
So,
thanks for listening to the end.
yeah, thanks for listening. And hopefully you enjoyed hearing us talk about biking. And if you're, we're going to be out there next week. So when you're listening to this now, we'll be probably
Yeah, cheer me
near
on.
Matsumoto. So yeah, be thinking about Annie.
Wow, Zeb's like, I won't be tired at all.
I'll be fine.
Yeah.
Um,
I'll be fine too. I'm excited.
Yeah, well, thanks for listening. And don't forget, you can leave a review or subscribe or tell all your friends.
Or all three.
Everybody. All
yeah,
of them,
and
all
we'll
at
be
once.
back regular time next week, and we'll tell you how our trip went.
Yeah, hopefully it goes well and we can let you know.
Yeah. All right, thanks for listening.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.